Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and today we're looking at Jeff Goldblum, Chaotician. This deck comes to us from Lexa, who says, I saw this card get revealed and I immediately had to build a deck for it. Needs a better win condition beyond the second card drawn mechanics, and that's it. Yeah, we can definitely work with that. This is a deck that was brought to the front of the lists by Lexa for supporting the channel. Thank you so much, Lexa. It seems we have a bit of a backlog because our donation, program, software, website seems to have not been emailing me the people who have donated to bring their decks to the front. I'll definitely be on the lookout in the future, so thank you for your patience as it's been a little bit for this deck to come out. In the meantime, if you'd also like to send me a deck list I can make a video of, there is a link in the video description below. And if you would like to bring your deck list to the front of the queue, make it the next video I work on like Lexa did, there is a link for that as well. And finally, if you'd like to take a look at this deck list for Jeff Goldblum, and yes, I will be calling him that the whole time, there is a link in the description for the full deck list so you can take a look yourself. So, our Chaotician, what does Jeff Goldblum do? Well, he's 3 mana in Izzet colors, red, blue. He's a 2/2 human scientist, has two abilities, two lines of text that are pretty important. The first one is, when a player draws their second card each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. And then it says, during each player's turn, that player may cast a spell from among the cards they don't own exiled with this card, and they can pay mana of any color to cast it. So how does this work in practice? Well, this says whenever a player draws their second card that's exiled, and then depending on the power of the card, the next player will get to cast it. So I would suggest there are 2 ways to build Jeff Goldblum. The first way, which is what Lexa has chosen, which is a very fun way, is to go full on into this chaos theory stuff. And the entire idea is that we are going to have the entire table constantly drawing cards. And as they are constantly drawing cards, the number of exiled cards is going to grow very, very quickly. So instead of just, there's only 1 card exiled, there'll be ideally 4 at minimum at a time. The perk of this method is that you get to see a large variety of cards, and there will always be cards to choose from. The negative, of course, of this method is that your opponents are going to get the best selection before you do, or even just more often. The simple math of it is that each player can cast 1 spell a turn, and you are 1 player, and your opponents are 3 players. So, depending on turn order and what gets flipped, you are going to have maybe 4th or hopefully 3rd or 2nd pick from the lot. There's going to be situations that you'll have first pick, and that'll be great, but that's not always going to be the case. So, it is a quantity over quality idea. The alternative way to play Jeff Goldblum would be to play in a much more controlling way, where the goal is to, very much so, be very controlling of this chaos theory and making sure that you get the best selection all the time by, for example, using extra draws at the end of your last opponent's end step so that you will have the first selection. But technically, that won't even work, for instance, as it is your opponent's end step, it is their turn, and they may cast a card that is, exiled under Jeff Goldblum. It gets even trickier once you realize that you can do it on your own turn, but of course you're going to be behind in mana when you do so. I, of course, find this dynamic very funny because it is the entire idea of the in-universe explanation of chaos theory of trying to control chaos will probably be very difficult and not worth it. But just letting chaos go free, well, we'll see what happens. All right, with that out of the way, let's take a look let's take a look at the deck that's been crafted here. And I think generally this is a really good start. There's a lot of exclamation points here and there for cards that just have not been released yet, with Doctor Who stuff and fiery dinosaurs. But beyond that, we have a nice little setup here. I will say we have tried to fit in almost every single every player draws card here, and I think there's probably a few we could go without. Some are just better than others, and also some are just, I'm going to suggest, rather annoying to work with. Dakra Mystic is a card that I've never liked. I mean, that's a lie. I really liked it when it came out and I thought it was really fun. And then the years went by and I realized I hate this card profoundly. I would very much so recommend not using the card, even with the really cool synergies it provides. It is just going to make you very, very upset. It takes up time, there's never good choices, and because we can't even get too far ahead this way, namely because we're basically drawing 3 for 1, we draw 1, our opponents collectively draw 3, this is just bad. Yeah, if it didn't require mana, maybe I would like it, but I think Dakra Mystic has to go. And that just stood out to me before we even looked at, you know, mana curve and what have you. So let's go take a look at that. So our mana curve is kind of what we expect. We kind of go out for a while, so let's look at the end. 9 I'm expecting to be Blasphemous Act, and it is, so that's easy. That's not 9 mana. Agent of Treachery and Flaming Tyrannosaurus. I think we're going to come back to Treachery. And then we have Echo of Eons there's actually a 3 mana spell, and Coveted Jewel that we'll also talk about. But otherwise, the curve is really nice, despite it going a bit further. In fact, the toughest part of the curve is how many 3 mana spells we have. And the problem is there's just not a lot of good solutions to this, namely due to the fact that, well, almost all wheels start at 3 mana, so we're going to try to play as many of those as possible, and then a lot of the cards that take advantage of said wheels are also in 3 mana. It's just kind of tough, unfortunately. So what we should be doing is trying to cut out as many cards as we can that aren't necessary at 3 mana. And I think we'll start here. And I think the first one that comes to mind right away is Glittering Stockpile. I just don't think this belongs here. This is a fancy card. I like the fact that it can generate quite a bit of mana, and obviously it can be really, really good with a few. I should actually, as I say this, see how many 3 mana spells I'm going to suggest so I can catch myself from looking silly. And it looks like it's just 1. Okay, 2. Okay, not so bad. All right, Glittering Stockpile just feels kind of cute. I think you can do a lot better. I think this is just a 3 mana spell. You need to hit 6 mana in this deck very quickly, and this doesn't help that. It does add 1 mana per turn, but then when you use the final ability, it's just gone forever. I'm just not a big fan of the card itself. Likewise, Misleading Signpost feels like a fun card, and I do like it. It's just 3 mana. We have to be making cuts here at 3 mana, and unfortunately this card has to go. It is a fun, tricky card, but this deck is already got a lot of, it's juggling a lot of things in the air, and therefore we can't keep adding more things for it to think about, so I think this is a pretty clean cut. Let's see. Curse of Verbosity seems fine. I'm going to let that go because it is on theme. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is a really good card, but we're starting to get kind of... This is kind of the zone that I'm going to start being a little, picky at it. I just feel like this is too much. It's too slow. It's too off theme. Yeah, we're going to get some treasure tokens with 1 or 2 attacks, and then attacks will probably be impossible. Yeah, we're going to get to draw at least our second card to activate the our commander for free. And then we get Kiki Chiki's Reflection. All in all, I'm just not too impressed here. There's a lot of decks that can really use this ability, and I don't think this is one of them. So I would cut that here. Let's see. You draw cards from the bottom of your library rather than the top whenever Scry surveils or searches. I don't quite understand why this is here. I think Riversong is a cool commander, but needs to be built around. So I would probably say cut Riversong. If we could, we need to be able to force our opponent to do these things, and drawing an extra card is not one of them. So I think we're pretty happy to cut that. Noggle Ransacker is great. Min is fantastic. Magus. The rest of these are very, very good, I think. Arcane Artisan continues to be a card that profoundly confuses me because, like, this is stupid good, right? Like, I get that if you lose Arcane Artisan, you lose the card, but, like, this is cheating creatures into play for 3 mana while drawing you a card. I just have a really hard time understanding why this is, like, not really played or seen play. There must be something I'm not. Maybe it's just the ease of destroying the Artisan, but, like, if you exile this and just play any card from your hand that has a really big ETB, I think you'll be profoundly happy. So I'm just always confused about that card. Saihi feels cute, not just because she's chibi, but also just, I don't think this is what we want to do. I think the main thing that keeps us from dying is the fact that our opponents benefit from us being around. I don't think spending 3 mana to create blockers slowly is where we want to do, what we want to do with this. And don't get me wrong, I do recognize that we've got some important artifacts, but they don't do exactly what we want them to do, so I think we should be happy to cut Saihi. And Dak Faden and Jace, I feel like... The thing is, I do like these abilities. Dak Faden, of course, is really good, but Jace is maybe just a little too far in everyone draws, because I think one of the problems with Jace is that he can be attacked. And I think that's relevant because there's just going to be situations where you're getting people to draw so many cards, and having Jace on the battlefield when your opponents are feeling that stress, Jace is a card they can attack and get rid of. It gives them a direction to point their aggression at, even if for a while it's helping him. That's the only thing that has me stopping, that makes me not want to play him, is just we have so many others, and this ability feels just kind of tacked on. Going through other cards, something I just keep seeing is Time of Ice. I don't understand why this is here. I really don't. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't understand why this is here. It doesn't work with our draw card. It doesn't work with, we don't tap things down. It's a fine card in a lower power setting, but it's 4 mana and I don't quite understand why we're playing it. So if we can, I would say cut that for sure. Unless there's something, like there has to be something I'm missing, I keep thinking to myself. Looking at the rest, Agent of Treachery, yes, let's go back to the ones I said we'd get back to. Coveted Jewel feels just a little too much. Coveted Jewel belongs in super aggressive decks that can make the most of those extra cards. But here we have a problem. Not only are we feeding we're already feeding our opponents cards. Not only are we feeding them cards in general, we're also feeding them cards from our opponents' decks. So to then also feed them mana, even though that's one of the cards I'm going to suggest, doesn't feel that great when we have no control over it, right? Coveted Jewel's problem is that it's possible that it never comes back to us. We're just not reaping the rewards. We're just giving away really good stuff. And what I think this does by... Like, this is meant to be a card that someone gets a hold of and uses that advantage to win the game. Hint, it's supposed to be you, right? But this deck has a really hard time protecting and reclaiming the Coveted Jewel. And because of that, I think Coveted Jewel is just not where this deck wants to be. It's also 6 mana, which is a lot, and I think honestly, you just shouldn't be playing this here. So I would cut that. And then going to Agent of Treachery, there's this tension I haven't talked about in this deck yet that I really like, but it's kind of silly. And the tension is this. You are going to exile cards from your deck as well, right? Jeff Goldblum doesn't care if it's an opponent to you, it's a player. So some of your cards are going to be exiled and at the behest of your opponents to play. The problem is some of your cards are built for this system. So like, for example, Locust God is really, really good in a deck that forces players to draw a lot of cards. But do you know where this card is also really, really good? In your opponent's hands. Now, there is only so much we can do about things like this. I think we should be playing at least one of the Homeward Path, I believe it is, to return cards, permanents to their owners, namely for your own creatures. Or you could play a few Act of Treason cards, because if you Act of Treason your opponent's Locust God that belongs to you, at the end of turn, it will go back into your... Like, it won't go anywhere. It'll stay on your battlefield. And I'm suggesting these because, my goodness, the Locust God is really, really good, so you need to have some backup strategies when your opponents play it. However, Agent of Treachery... This is maybe even worse, because the thing with Agent of Treachery is that if you can cast it, you're just pretty happy, right? It doesn't quite particularly matter who, like how many draw effects there are, how many kind of like synergies are required. Agent of Treachery is just bonkers. It's just 7 mana, steal a permanent, right? And there's just decks that do not have access to this ability that are going to be so, so happy to gain this ability. And with that in mind, not even counting the if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards, not even talking about the fact that you can enable that for your opponent so your Agent of Treachery opponent can actually get that text. Namely, because if it's your Agent of Treachery and they steal another card, they're 2 of 3. Yeah, this card is scary on your opponent's side of the field, so I really, really want to cut it. There's a lot of cards like that, but this one is the one that I think stands out the most. Like, Flaming Tyrannosaurus, yeah, it's going to deal lots and lots of damage over time, but you can at least Act of Treason it. If you Act of Treason or anything else Agent of Treachery, you don't get the thing they stole from you back. You just get the agent, who is particularly weak after the ETB. So, something worth noting. Also, I could say you could also play Blink cards to get those creatures back. But I would be very much so aware of how delicious some of your cards are for your opponents to cast. It is really interesting that our boy Jeff Goldblum will not only give your opponents, like give everyone each other's cards to enable fun plays, it will also give them the built-in answers to those plays that you are playing. So you really cannot have control over Chaos Theory, right? You cannot have control over this deck. So I'm not saying don't play these cards. These cards are fun and good. Well, I'm saying don't play Agent of Treachery, but you need a backup plan. And if you can find Blinks, I think Blinks are the best answer to that, because at least when you blink it, it'll specific, not all of them, but certain Blinks will return them under their owner's control, and that will be ideal, so you can regain at least the permanents that you lose when someone else casts them. Okay, those are generally my notes. There's a lot of other cards here, but I wanted to hit the general notes first because this is a first draft. I can't believe I haven't seen the Kami of Celebration art before. That's so, so funny. And it is really good. I don't know if this is the deck for it, but it is a really cool card. All right, let's go into additions. And unsurprisingly, the first bunch of additions are very basic additions that I think the deck desperately needs, but aren't like fun and unique. And what they are, unfortunately, is just more removal. So I'm adding Flame Slash, I'm adding Seal of Fire, and I'm adding Lithomantic Barrage. And if you really wanted, this could also, let's see, how did I find this before? It was red, 1 mana, thank you, and then blue or white. And then if you wanted Rending Volley as well. Why am I suggesting these cards so aggressively? Well, there are certain really like often played cards that really mess up this deck. Now, before we get into those ones, there's a few that are just like fine, right? Like if you see Fairy Mastermind, just as it's good in your hand, it's good on your opponent's hands. They're going to draw more cards. That might not be a big problem for you, but it's something worth considering. However, the cards I'm more thinking about are like Drannith Magistrate that completely shuts down your commander like entirely, because all of a sudden the entire purpose of your deck has been shut down. I'm thinking cards like Notion Thief, or that like now all of a sudden it's not just that, like if it was Consecrated Sphinx, I'd say that's not a problem. It's just more draws and you're fine with it. But Notion Thief stops people from getting those draws, which then like basically turn off all of the, you only get 1 trigger when you'd get like 3. And also then you'll wheel and lose the game, right? Or Narset, Parter of Veils, where Lithomantic Barrage is really good to shut her down and get rid of her. These are the cards, or I guess Teferi, 3 mana Teferi. These are all cards that see play that just completely incidentally shut down your deck. And I think you need answers for those cards. I also rather like these cards to be handed out to opponents. Now we do have lots of blue permanents, but we don't have anything that like needs to die. Even Ian Malcolm, oh my god, I said it. Jeff Goldblum is not going to be a high target priority, and it lets you play cards like certain of your red creatures cannot be targeted with Rending Volley or Lithomantic Barrage, which is rather nice. But all this to say, I think you need to go up in removal. There's just some targets that are just too powerful and you need to deal with them. Imagine we're playing and it is about to be my turn and you make someone draw 2. Could even be me. And they exile after the fact Drannith Magistrate. It's my turn, I get to cast off of Jeff Goldblum. Oh man, immediately am I casting that Drannith Magistrate, because that means I've drawn a card, because that card was not in my hand. So I've drawn a card, I got to play Drannith Magistrate, which is already a fantastic card, and I've completely shut everyone else off of ever taking advantage of your entire commander play. So, or commander deck. So I really suggest having removal. There's a few cards that are non-creature that probably require to be removed, and I think we need that other chaos card, which I can never remember its name. Let's sort by EDH rank. Chaos Warp. I think you also need to play Chaos Warp because there's going to be permanents that do very similar things. Also, this hits Narset where some removal won't, or Teferi. So I think you have to play this as well. I know this isn't fun things. I know we want to figure out a fun, win condition and a direction for the deck that has more silly things, but we need this kind of grounding first because the deck can really fold completely to just 1 or 2 cards. And then you are dependent on your opponents dealing with those cards. And sometimes they will, because Drannith Magistrate, everyone hates it, who's not playing it. But sometimes they won't. If 3 mana Teferi is out, and I don't play instant speed cards, I'm just going to leave him out, right? If he's not on my side of the field, because he doesn't hurt me. I don't mind. I'll make a deal with that player saying, hey, I'll keep 3 Fairy alive, in exchange for like a favor or something, and benefit from the fact that, actually does 3 mana Teferi stop? I guess it doesn't actually stop Jeff Goldblum. It makes Jeff Goldblum difficult because the instant spells get worse. Okay, sorry, 3 Fairy, I got the abilities a bit confused. So I guess I'm thinking more Is there a commander that stops you from casting spells outside of your hand? Maybe. I'm not sure of it. But stuff like Narset, I would say, if I'm not playing a deck that draws a tremendous amount of cards or finds different ways to put cards in my hand, I'll leave Narset alone. And in the meantime, actually, probably not, because then your wheels turn to discards. Okay, these are bad examples, but Dryneth Magistrate and like Notion Thief and cards like this, you need to be able to kill them. There's probably a bunch I'm not even thinking of. And probably Rule of Law effects need to be destroyed too, which is why Chaos Warp is really, really important. Because if everyone's casting one spell a turn, then they're probably either only getting advantage of Jeff Goldblum or not at all. And I don't know if that's ideal. Okay, let's go into some fun ones. Here's two things that help things get out of hand. Mana Flare doubles all mana from lands. I like this a lot. I like this a lot more than Coveted Jewel, even though it adds mana, because it adds mana to everyone. You get to take advantage of that. And it increases the chances of people taking advantage of your commander. But also, you have a lot of mana sinks, and Mana Flare lets you pay into those mana sinks, which I really, really like. This also just got reprinted from being a $5 card, so that's really, really nice. Likewise, Folio Fancies is a really fun mana sink because it lets you draw out your opponents. It lets you mill out your opponents. It's just a good card for this deck. It also stops people from going to discard, which is really nice. So those hands get bigger and bigger as people draw more and more. I think Folio Fancies with 1 or 2 activations is close to a win condition by itself. So I do really like it, though I'm going to suggest another win condition after. I think it's something worth considering. Blight Herder is my spicy addition to this deck. And the reason is, granted, your opponents can use it too, which is true for any of these cards, but I have a few that are better when you use them. But Blight Herder is really, really good because it lets you selectively remove a few cards from the pool that maybe you don't want around. And it provides you with 3 additional mana to then, which can be used as any color to cast more spells out of Jeff Goldblum. I will also suggest that maybe, how do I put this? The fact that it's a 4/5 is fine. I don't know. I'm thinking like it's hard to gauge these cards when we think of the fact that no matter what we do, our opponents have access to them. But I think that's fine. I think Blight Herder is going to be a fun card to come out, and it will mix up the available spells in an interesting way, which is what really attracts me to it. Something this makes me think of is that maybe there's a version of this deck that is based on taking as many extra turns as humanly possible. And I think the reason I say this is because the best way to take advantage of Jeff Goldblum is to have additional turns, because you're stuck at once a turn during your own turn. So by time warping yourself, you get an additional turn. But the same problem arises where your time warps start getting exiled, your opponents get to cast them, and they get to then do the combo that they haven't had to set up in any way at all, which is really, really silly. But just something on my mind. Something else that's interesting to me is Seething Song or other fast mana. I don't know to what degree I would suggest them, but I'll just follow me along on this thought process. So the idea I'm trying to have, and the next card will be like this too, is that you want to have cards that are better when you cast them and worse when your opponents cast them. And one of the ways you can do that is by targeting cards that are more powerful when they are not the card cast from underneath Jeff Goldblum. Let me explain what I mean. Seething Song is really, really good when you're going to cast a 5 mana spell from under Jeff Goldblum, because it's 3 mana, you get the 5 mana, and then you cast, let's say, Time Warp, because we just saw it. And you get to keep up the rest of your mana, or if your mana's screwed, you get to cast something like that, or you get to cast a 7 mana spell when you only have 5 mana, because this puts you up 2 mana. However, when Seething Song is the card that's underneath Jeff Goldblum, and you cast that, you don't get to cast another spell from Jeff Goldblum. which means you don't get to change this red mana into any color. It's just red mana. And it's just red mana that a lot of decks can't use as well, right? We can say that like a blue deck can use the red mana to pay for the generic mana pips, but there's a limit on that, right? They still need to pay the colored pips that are not red. And if the higher power level a deck is, imagine their hand is like Swords to Plowshares, Counterspell, Dovin's Veto, stuff like that. And Seething Song is underneath, Jeff Goldblum. All of a sudden, Seething Song does nothing for them. So it becomes a lot less attractive underneath. Now you might say, well, Kirst, what about the red decks? The red decks will be happy to play Seething Song. And to that I'll say, well, what can you do, right? There's only so much you can do. It is a deck about letting people play cool and big flashy stuff. Seething Song is fun for them to play, and most of the time it's not going to be relevant to non-red decks. And even that, most decks aren't just red, so playing a commander that has multiple colors might not be as possible with Seething Song as well. So this was something that was on my mind. It doesn't have to be Seething Song. It can be any red mana generation, but it's something worth considering. Another thing I was considering was these kind of specific transform cards. So Jin-Gitaxias is one of them, but the main idea here, Jin-Gitaxias sticks out because obviously he has a lot to do with card draw to begin with, so you're rather happy to have him. But if your opponent plays him, one, that trigger that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card, well, you already like that because you want your opponents to draw additional cards. But 2, they do not have access to the other side, the Great Synthesis. Because if they do, for some reason, activate that ability, well, too bad, it comes back to your side of the battlefield. And when it's on your side of the battlefield, you reap the rewards. They feel silly. Never happens again. However, if you cast Jin-Gitaxias yourself, you are very, very happy to flip to Great Synthesis and start ticking up. Because obviously, that Omniscience is really, even just for the turn, is really, really, really good. Because this deck, as you know, is very good at filling your hand full of stuff. You cast Great Synthesis, you put out all the cards you want to cast immediately, and you are very, very, very far ahead. All right. The last thing I wanted to say was the original answer to the question of what is our win condition? Well, to me, Niv Mizzet Curiosity felt like the easiest one to access. And Niv Mizzet, you can play both Niv Mizzets because you will be drawing a lot of cards, so you will get to do a lot of incidental damage. I will say you might deck out. So maybe having, I guess you have Midnight Clock, but having maybe a 1,000-Year Elixir or something, which I don't believe you have, might be useful to make sure that you don't, it's not 1,000-Year Elixir, it's the other one. It's the Bottled Life thing. But the one that shuffles your deck into your graveyard into your library is very, very, very helpful because then you won't mill out. But it's worth considering this is just a pretty straightforward win condition. You could even just play Niv Mizzet and just benefit from the fact that you're just drawing a bunch of cards. However, as normal, this is a card that can be stolen from your opponent, so just something to consider. Looking at Jeff Goldblum one more time, something that might be worth considering, and maybe I should have looked at this, but lands cannot be played from Jeff Goldblum's ability. So if you want to make your win condition something to do with your lands, you can make sure no one else has access to it. Granted, it does mean that if it's exiled, you just don't get to ever get it back. So yeah, I guess coming to our conclusion is that we have very little control over this deck, unfortunately. But I think that's a lot of fun. Let's go over my notes real quickly. My notes are this. Probably add a few more lands and fix the 19 basics is quite a few. you definitely need removal. Please put in as like at least 3 or 4 more removal spells. There are just some cards that just completely shut your deck off, and you're going to be very, very sad about it. Cut the Agent of Treachery, cut the Coveted Jewel, cut, where are you? Where's that? Time of Ice. There it is. Time of Ice. Consider playing some bounce spells that return under the owner's control, or consider playing some active treason effects to regain control of your creatures that you need. And I said cut a few 3-mana spells. I think it was Jace. I think it was Riversong. I may have named another one, but yeah. Oh, and Dakra Mystic. Please get rid of this card. I hate this card so much. And I think that would probably be it for the first draft. I think this deck has a lot of things in it that we can make it work into a very, very fun but yet very successful deck. But it's going to take a while. This is a very, very difficult deck. When we saw Zira last week, we talked about how Zira is a difficult commander to work with because she just defies common sense practices of making a commander strong. Jeff Goldblum over here not just defies them, but laughs at you for trying to build a good deck because, you know, chaos finds a way, and all of a sudden your best cards are going to be used against you. So there's probably some stuff that we can use. I wonder, the last thing I'll say, what is that Cleave card? Cleave in blue. Wash away. Counterspell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. Play this. This is free. Are you playing this already? You are not. Play this. This is free. This is how we can deal with certain things. All right. That's where I'll end it here. Thank you so much, Lexa, for sending me the deck. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for your patience as I am finding this backlog today, and I'll be making my way through it. This deck looks like so much fun, and if you'd like to send me the next draft of it, there's a link in the video description down below. And if you would like your deck to be the next deck that I work on, much like Lexa did, you can support the channel with a link in the video description below. Finally, if you like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, I would be very, very grateful. And good luck, Lexa. This looks like a fun deck, and I completely understand why you immediately went to it. I'm really excited to see how this deck comes through and is built. I'm stuck on Wash Away. Let's find our boy. Our handsome, handsome boy. All right, good luck.